Lorenzo Hunt managed to win the cruiserweight title in what was probably one of the weirdest and most chaotic fights in BKFC history. The card also featured the BKFC debut of none other than longtime UFC heavyweight veteran Ben Rothwell as he took on Bobo O'Bannon in the co-main event. Stay tuned to find out all about what went down. First things first, everything was going fine till it wasn't. Hunt fought for the vacant cruiserweight title against Quentin Henry in the main event of BKFC 30 on Saturday night at the Fant Ewing Coliseum in Monroe, Louisiana. The two men had no love for one another going into the fight, and that animosity was felt almost immediately as Hunt charged across the cage at the opening bell, swinging punches. Henry returned fire, but their legs became entangled, and Henry collapsed to the ground, Hunt on top of him. While Henry was on the ground, Hunt unleashed a powerful right hand, and that's when things started to go haywire. Moving on, Henry passing out didn't seem to bother Hunt. Henry lay face down and motionless after the shot on the ground, apparently not cold. While Henry's corner roused him, Hunt stood in the center of the ring screaming that his illegal punch had missed and that Henry was faking it in order to get a DQ win. The fight was stopped while BKFC reviewed the tape to determine whether an illegal strike had been delivered. This also gave Henry some breathing room. After a few minutes, and once Henry was up and moving again, referee Dan Miragliotta restarted the fight in the center of the ring, seemingly agreeing with Hunt's assessment of the situation. Now let's talk about how the rest of the fight went down. After the first round, Miragliotta could be heard explaining that Hunt's punch did not land, so he chose not to deduct a point. But in the end, it wouldn't have mattered. The two men fought in the third round, where Lorenzo Hunt dropped Henry with 35 seconds left. Dan Miragliotta requested a stoppage after failing to answer the referee's count. At 1:36 of round 3, Hunt was declared the winner. He was the only two-division champion in the history of BKFC. Next up, even fans were confused about this BKFC fight. Many fans on Twitter were perplexed by Hunt's lack of disqualification after he appeared to throw a clearly illegal strike. However, multiple replays shown by BKFC were inconclusive as to whether Hunt's strike actually landed, resulting in a rematch rather than a DQ. Finally, once the fight ended, Hunt realized how wrong he was. After the fight, Hunt praised Henry, saying he expected his opponent to go for a cheap DQ win, but Henry proved him wrong. In contrast, Henry, perhaps understandably, felt he had been the victim of a shady situation, claiming that he was legitimately knocked out by a cheap shot and awoke to his corner shaking him and asking if he could still fight. It didn't matter in the end, as Hunt officially won at 1:36 of round 3, becoming only the second two-division champion in BKFC history. Up next, Ben Rothwell versus Bobo O'Bannon in the BKFC co-main event. Ben Rothwell was going to swing for the fences until he got the knockout in his BKFC debut, and luckily for him, it happened almost immediately. In the co-main event of Saturday's BKFC 30 event in Monroe, Rothwell destroyed Bobo O'Bannon. Since Rothwell wasted no time proving himself in his first bare-knuckle fight, it was safe to assume he had some rage to vent on his opponent. Rothwell made it very clear before the fight that he was going to put the heavyweight division on notice, and the King of Kenosha did just that when he destroyed O'Bannon in just 19 seconds. Rothwell charged across the ring, firing combinations as the bell rang, and O'Bannon returned fire. That proved to be a bad decision, as Rothwell clipped him with a right hand and then a vicious uppercut, sending O'Bannon tumbling to the canvas and failing to make the 10 count. Following the fight, Rothwell warned the rest of the heavyweight division that he had arrived. Now, Rothwell had decided enough was enough. Rothwell had a huge chip on his shoulder because of his last fight. Bobo's manager took it upon himself to post that fight and make a not-so-subtle taunt, which Rothwell took personally. The American MMA fighter said it was time and that he'd been holding back for way too long. Rothwell added that he didn't care if it was a minute or 5 rounds. He was prepared to go like that, but it ended up being 5 seconds, which was how he pictured it in his head. Coming up, Rothwell's UFC Vegas 42 loss definitely had a hand in pushing him this far. Rothwell signed with BKFC after fighting in the UFC for 17 straight fights, his most recent appearance ending in a 32-second TKO loss to Rogerio de Lima at UFC Vegas 42. During an early exchange in the first round, the Brazilian wobbled Ben Rothwell with a punch, and then he just rushed forward with a relentless barrage of strikes. While Rothwell attempted to survive by displaying incredible toughness, de Lima was unafraid to keep throwing punches until the veteran heavyweight buckled under the pressure of the damage he was taking. At 32 seconds into the first round, referee Herb Dean jumped in to stop the fight, hesitated briefly, and then declared the fight over. De Lima discussed the victory, admitting that he knew it was a difficult decision and that he had a lot of respect for Ben. The heavyweights had no time to warm up because Rothwell was looking to set up his own punches, but he didn't get much of a chance to throw anything everything because De Lima was relentless with his offensive onslaught. A perfectly placed right hand knocked Rothwell off his feet, and De Lima took advantage of the opportunity to continue punching him until the fight was over. The win moved De Lima to 3-1 in his past 4 fights, as he became the first fighter since Cain Velasquez in 2009 to finish Rothwell with strikes. Next, the support of those around him is what made Rothwell keep going. It wasn't just the performance in his BKFC debut that stood out to Rothwell, it was the reaction of those closest to him to the event as a whole. Rothwell talked about how David Feldman did something incredible by starting this, and for it being such a new promotion, they were doing so many new shows. He added that they were really doing an amazing job. The 41-year-old MMA fighter said that in good ways, he kind of felt the way he used to in the IFL, adding that it was cool to have the opportunity to be a superstar. Rothwell said he was the most excited to help them grow this because it was skyrocketing since everyone was excited about the knockout. The coolest thing for him was all the new people that had never watched it before, fans, family, his friends. His friends and even fans expressed how amazed they were. Everyone was talking about how it was so exciting given that the fights were pretty much all knockouts. Even girlfriends and wives of friends were saying that they'd usually get bored with MMA, but they were watching Rothwell's fight, and that was really exciting for the MMA fighter to hear. Lastly, Rothwell was confident and determined to do things his way. A lot of longtime UFC veterans have managed to make the transition from the cage to the BKFC ring, which usually has had mixed reviews depending on the athlete in question. Rothwell had a lot of the same pre-flight nerves that he usually has, but this time around things felt a bit different. Thinking back on past comments made by legendary heavyweight boxer Mike Tyson, Rothwell talked about how there were always nerves before a fight, and if they're not there, you should be worried. But this time it wasn't like that. Mike Tyson didn't come into his mind until after the fight. He said that in the back room, you feel like a little, and then you start walking to the ring, and you become a boy, then you get closer and you're a man, and once you get there, you become an animal. Rothwell said that that was exactly how he felt at the time of his BKFC fight. Rothwell was absolutely blown away by the kindness of his fellow BKFC fighters during the week, with a lot of them talking about how competing in this sport was different on the hands than MMA, and explained how you don't need to throw with full power to avoid hand injuries. The advice was much appreciated, but Rothwell was always planning on taking a different approach, even if it meant going against the grain. Rothwell explained that he threw his fist as hard as he could, and if you broke his hands on his opponent's face, he wouldn't have cared. He supposed that was what was different about him. He wasn't holding back no matter how dangerous it got. That's a wrap for this video. Do you think Hunt really did throw an illegal punch? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.